Hello everyone, Johnny Hurricane here from GamersHeroes.com, and why don't you sit back, relax, and let me tell you about Final Fantasy VII Remake. Let's get started. Before we go any further, a code was provided by the publisher. Approaching the Final Fantasy VII Remake is a unique challenge. Never before have we reviewed a game that story is already written, already concluded. Yet, for many, this release is likely the first encounter they've had with the characters and the story known by so many for so long. The original game's journey is done. It's set in stone, a relic of the past. However, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is not a simple retelling of the same story. It's a complete reimagination using the wonders of modern gaming technology to offer more than a simple second take. The core aspects of the narrative remain familiar as protagonist Cloud joins forces with the eco-terrorist group Avalanche in an effort to take down the infamous Shinra, a corporation of greed that will stop at nothing to drain Mako from the earth to fuel its profits. It's the core of the story that made the original game so strong, and one that continues with the remake. However, it's not afraid to mix things up. There are some huge changes to the overarching story. They may not be for everyone, but I thoroughly enjoyed leaving the game with a fresh notebook full of questions. Biggs, Wedge, Jessie, Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, that's a long list of standout characters from the original game. But whether it's due to the technical limitations of the time, or just the original game's scope, many characters didn't get their time to shine. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is based entirely within the confines of Midgar, a town built on Mako energy that struggles with a clear divide of have and have-nots. Compiling the first episode of the new saga into Midgar leaves out some key aspects, but in terms of story, it shines through. Characters that were simple passovers from the original game come to the forefront with a burst of vibrant personality and depth. This applies to the main characters of Avalanche, previously minor characters that take on more dominant roles, or new characters entirely. A combination of brilliant graphics, fantastic animation, and industry-leading voiceover work deliver a memorable cast from start to finish. I had little doubt that the Final Fantasy VII Remake would deliver on the narrative front, with my biggest concerns being that of the gameplay. My biggest problem with this title is the linearity of the level design. So much of the game is just one big corridor after another, with minor branches, going to find a chest or a collectible. I would often want to turn around and explore an area, only for the game to remind me that my current goal was somewhere else, and I could not go back. It's a problem throughout much of the game, and one I'm sure will disappoint a lot of players. However, it is not without merit. There are some brief segments where areas become more open and side quests become unlocked, which makes the monotony a little more bearable. However, it's the later stages of the game that save the experience, swinging in like a wrecking ball of redemption. In the final chapters, the Midgar areas you've explored become more accessible, allowing you to return to find missed items or complete old quests. It's a refreshing moment that offers the final 5 to 10 hours of the game as a wave of enjoyment. Up until that point, the story carries it well, but the A to B nature of much of the game will leave a sour taste for some. One of the more controversial design choices surrounding the remake was the removal of the old school turn-based combat system, a system that relied heavily on planning, tactics, and strategies. In its place, a more modern, real-time combat system that combines the hack-and-slash foundations with a strategic twist. The combat revolves around the ATB gauge, a gauge that builds over time with each basic attacks a character lands. Once full, the character can then use magic attacks or powerful abilities or even summon godlike creatures, and also use items. While the real-time aspects of combat may be off-putting for fans of the old school, it blends really well with the ATB system. Navigating through the skills and abilities in combat slows time to a crawl, giving you ample time to manage your ATB use and choose the appropriate abilities and skills. Do you want to launch the next big sword attack to finish an enemy off? Or maybe save that last gauge for an emergency healing spell? This risk versus reward element continues throughout, and it grows in challenge and value throughout the game. I will forever be a fan of the old turn-based days, but I fell in love with this combat in the end. Throughout the FF7 Remake, you will have up to 3 characters in your party at one time. Cloud focuses primarily on sword attacks. Tifa is an absolute badass with just punches and kicks. Just punches and kicks everything to death. Barrett utilizes long-range gun attacks, and Aerith focuses on magical abilities. Each character functions well enough as the AI, but it's when you begin to combine their abilities together that the combat transforms from mediocre into something challenging and incredibly satisfying. Sticking to just Cloud will leave many experience a dull and lackluster combat system, but the game does attempt to encourage quick switching between characters utilizing their different abilities. New weapons are limited in supply, but each carries with it a unique ability. Once mastered, you can then use that ability on other weapons and then learn new abilities from new weapons. This builds an arsenal for each character, ability by ability, and that's not including the materia system. And you better make sure you learn those abilities. FF7 Remake boss battles are some of the most intense I've experienced in any game that wasn't developed by From Software. So much of the game is clearly designed to be as accessible as possible. There are puzzles that even a child could complete in seconds. The game prompts you if you're about to miss something permanently. A lot of it has gone into dumbing the experience down, and often not for the better. But then the combat comes in like an explosion, mixing battles that are over in seconds with 20-minute fights for survival. Each boss is unique in design and mechanics, ramping up the challenge as things progress. There's definitely room for frustration to set in, especially for those more interested in the story. Nevertheless, I found each battle to be more satisfying than the last. Its difficulty isn't necessarily a problem, but its lack of conviction one way or another, too hard or too easy, really does mess up the pacing. There's also the inclusion of one of Final Fantasy's most loved features, materia. Serving as a magic system, the mechanic gives players the opportunity to equip materia in certain ways. Linking together different abilities leads to stronger abilities, or even the addition of new effects. There are a lot of new materia out there, so fans of new and old will have a great time hunting all of them down and piecing them together. Coupled with summons, minigames, and secrets, this title begins as a solid RPG, but eventually opens up into a great Final Fantasy game. Final Fantasy VII was where it all began for me. It was the first time I realized games could be more than simply fun. They could create an emotional experience alongside an exciting adventure, bridging various aspects of storytelling into a single package, immersing the player much in the same way a good movie or book would. As a young and impressionable youth, it opened my eyes in so many ways. Following the original adventures of Cloud and Avalanche is an experience that I will long treasure, plucking on each string of the emotional harp like a perfect orchestral piece. Final Fantasy VII was never perfect. It had its flaws. However, for me, the game marked the beginning of my love for the RPG genre, a love I still carry with me today. Much like its predecessor, Final Fantasy VII Remake is far from perfect. Its linear design and difficulty spikes may be off-putting for some, but stick through the rough bits and there's another incredible story and wonderful world waiting. Alright, that'll do it for me. If you liked what you saw, I got what you needed. Like, comment, subscribe. See you guys in the next video. Later, Gators.